It's been a while since I've done a drawing video for my comics. This is page 5 of Lady of Sorrow Springs. It's going pretty well. I'm getting a little bit bored of the storyline, although I had like a little gunfight just kicking off right there. But I've also gotten involved in this idea I had to do a tabloid. This will be the second tabloid that I've ever done. The first one I did was the Fenario, Chronicles of Fenario, or whatever it was. Fenario Tales. But this one I want to do is more like a science fantasy one. And I don't know if you can see this. I'll make it even bigger. This is an 11 by 14. This is actually 11 by 14. I should probably be doing this at 2 up, but you end up with a lot less levels. So I'm going to go ahead and try and see how good I can do at 1 up, 11 by 14. The idea is to do an 11 by 14 tabloid that you would have that you would be able to page through. And with a tabloid, you would get it folded in half, and so this would be the top fold. So the title would be on here too, and I kind of put some title. You can just barely see it in gray here as a guideline, but I'm going to try and do my own lettering over it. Maybe it's on its own layer. Also, this side of the drawing I never completed. I had an idea to put maybe another dinosaur over here, which I could still do. Maybe one that's looking down. These things are called marsh gazers. And the idea is that there's this world that's post-apocalyptic, but it's descended into its own realm of fantasy. I've been playing this game called Caves of Cud, which has influenced me. But I'm also thinking of things like Flash Gordon, and I've been thinking about Bill Everett a lot. Dirk the Demon specifically, which is Dirk the Demon is great because there's really nothing to it. Like it's a non-story, which I think was modeled after a sort of Flash Gordon story, but with a kid protagonist. But I think I've read all the Dirk Demon stories, and there's nothing that really happens in them. But they're an interesting premise. I mean, stuff happens in the story, but like in one, they find an old vault where somebody, for some reason, is still living. Hundreds or maybe thousands of years later, he somehow is an insane guy, is still living there. No explanation. He's just still there. But he's crazy, and he attacks them with like a revolver. And Dirk has to kill him. That's one of the stories I remember. One of the other ones is more like a Flash Gordon story. In this one, on this first page, you can see this crash-landed ship. And it's pretty subtle, but you can see the body of the guy. Of the ancient astronaut that's fallen into the muck of the marsh. This is the salt marsh. And then you see these mutant dinosaur-looking creatures with one eye. Are just sort of grazing nearby. So kind of a Gamma World or Metamorphosis Alpha, or to I might even tie it in with one of my other previous comics called Level 7. I did a couple of different takes on Level 7. It's one of those things you keep developing stuff until you kind of figure out what you really want to do with it. So that's my idea. I put a lot of work into these sort of jungle marsh trees. My idea is like I think I was inspired by an issue of Weird Fantasy, and I think it's a Wally Wood cover, but it's a crash landed spaceship with a bunch of skeletal astronauts just hanging out of it, like they were involved in some kind of hot rod race or something like that. They're just spewing all over. So we're taking a similar concept, but in this case, it's the destroyed ship, and you can see it's got bullet holes and stuff like where it's been attacked. So it tells a different story. So my philosophy now of trees is to we're blocking out this area underneath as it reaches up into the canopy to show the shading there. And if we're subtle enough, I'm not sure we are. If we're subtle enough, it should look pretty cool. Let me drop my title back into there. I kind of like working without any underdrawing, just kind of winging it. You never know what you're going to get. This is also a good way to get very frustrated if it doesn't go well. Meant to be like a lily pad. There's a big flower over there. This area is a bit confusing. Now I'm going to try and use my comic making instincts in a lot of ways to not worry as much about process, or I don't even know if I want this comic to make sense. I just want it to be interesting to look at. You know, in its own way. All right. I'm just trying to figure out how could we do something interesting with this eye. Like Jack Kirby would have an interesting eye in his monsters. I've also got to make a lot of extra effort to kind of proof my line weights. Those are always a concern. Like if you get your line weights right, you get the depth right. And if you get the depth right, your three-dimensionality will be more convincing. And then there's contour lines and all these different ways of expressing volume and drama. This sort of vast toolbook or textbook or telephone book, all these different techniques, and you don't just use one, you got to use multiples. You got to be thinking about all of them. All right, this all feels pretty good right here. When I do the title, I'm going to do it on its own layer just in case I mess it up, so I can, you know, take another shot at it if I have to. Also, this tabloid thing, it's going to be in color. My plan is to do 12 or 16 pages. The comics will be one-pagers, 11 by 14 in size, so Treasury Edition sized, but one-pagers, and they could be half-pagers too. Like you could do like this cover, and then I'm going to do a half-page. There's going to be one comic down here, and it's going to be a mix of some of my old characters. Like I'm going to have an Adam Frankenstein wandering around in the futuristic swamps. I'm definitely going to have a rabbit fighter one. Who else could I have? I could totally do Corvo. And some of my mutant characters that I've done, like the level 7 characters, might be fun to do.
That's breakfast.
There's some more trees. Kind of doing these sort of what do you call these? Mangrove roots. It's a good idea to get out and look at stuff, which I haven't done in a while. Or, failing that, you can look at how other comic artists have approached, you know, how to draw different types of trees or foliage or rocks. There's at least 90 ways to draw rocks, you know what I mean? Somebody was showing me that, like, they were showing me a couple of different Steve Ditko comics, and there were just some random rocks there. And what he pointed out is that Ditko didn't do the same rocks every time. He didn't just draw the same rocky cliffs every time. He would take a different approach to the rocks each time he drew them. You know? So that's a good lesson to learn, that you know, there's a couple of different ways to try and do some of this stuff. And at some point, drawing becomes less like formula, you know, like the Loomis method or any kind of constructive anatomy method. And maybe it's more like painting sometimes, where you just sort of throw down some shapes and hope for the best. I think that's one of the good things. I've been kind of hanging out with the Zomic crew, and they are not as tied to, let's say, more formulaic approaches to figure drawing and things. Now, on the one hand, that means wildly varying results. You know? But on the other hand, when you're cartooning, as opposed to trying to do serious figure drawing, you can't get it wrong. You just can't get it wrong. That's starting to look like it's coming into place. I'm gonna make sure our outlines are really nice and thick on this foreground character here, so he doesn't accidentally fade into the background. And what I just did there is there was a big long, see like this big curve right here? Make that curve into small leafy shaped curves. At least break up the outline. You don't have to draw every leaf, but depending on how you draw your curves, the curves themselves can become predictable. And you're trying to give the impression that those are leaves, even if the leaves aren't perfectly done. Alright, that looks like it's gonna go good. Alright, at this point, now it's just texture. This old, blasted, dead tree is falling over the swamp. It's still got some vines on it that are quite new. You can even put some vines hanging down or some more of that sphagnum moss, Spanish moss. This is alien moss. It's really not alien moss. I mean, I think technically it's still meant to be earth. Just a post-apocalyptic alternate version of Earth. All right. We're going to leave it at this, and I'll work on this figure here. This is going to be the final mystery. I might have to actually look at some references for, you know, maybe we're going to have him as a spaceman of some kind, where he's a pilot. Maybe he wasn't a spaceman, maybe he's a soldier. He was whoever was writing that thing. Maybe there's even like an oxygen tube or something. Seems out of place. That sort of draws your eye because it looks unusual. He's also covered with the moss and the muck. Alright, that's enough right now. What I'm going to continue to do next is somehow lay out some kind of title. I also had this idea of doing incredible science fantasy down at the bottom. And then up at the top, let's add text. Oh, this is the idea I had last night. I was almost asleep. Lost Perelandra. And we're going to distort it a little bit. Well, let's make it bigger first. Like, let's say that's our title. Or use distort to make it a little bit bigger like that. Or actually, leave it like that. Select all. I think I can make it like as outlines. And then I could sort of retrace it. Oh, come on, what's going on with my stupid thing over here? Anyway, that's my idea. Lost Perelandra, incredible science fantasy. And we'll figure out some tricks to do with this, but the other thing I want to do, where is it? No, here it is, distort. Like that, yeah. And that'll have all the elements that we want for our cover. You know, we're going to put the price in there or something like that, you know. And then the first comic will be down here below. And that'll be page 1 of our tabloid. Alright, please like, follow, and subscribe. There'll be more comics every day. All kinds of cool things happening. Talk to you later.